Hello and good afternoon, good evening to all watching. Buenas tardes, buenas noches por los que están mirando. For those of you who know, so I'm Louis, one of the founders of Entre Trámites. My colleague Alexa was going to be on this call as well. However, we had a temporary technical issue, so she might be back to launch questions coming from you guys on your behalf. So I would like to introduce myself. I'm Louis, co-founder of Entre Trámites. So we're a one-stop destination, one-stop shop for everything accounting, bureaucratic, tax. Basically, anything boring in Spain we cover. Immigration, tax, accounting, we're the place for it. Now, today, we're going to be touching on an issue which is potentially less well known by many of the accountants here in Spain, which is to do with OUs, SLs, autónomos. Effectively, and you might be thinking, what on earth is an OU? What are you on about? We're talking about the accounting. We're talking about the accounting side of the Estonian system. So one of the issues which many people moan about being in Spain is the potentially excessively bureaucratic and potentially dull lost time that you've got to do with your accounting, your tax, and other issues, filling out all the relevant paperwork. So what are we going to be touching today? Today, we're going to be presenting the various different aspects. So first off, we're going to run through the different combinations which you can use within Spain. Now, in this current broadcast, we're going to be talking about Estonian OUs. We are not going to touch so much on US LLCs or LLCs, which are often used by others. However, we are happy to open any questions to the floor. The idea will be that I will present a little bit to you guys on presentation, and then please fire away with questions either in the comment section directly here in StreamYard, or potentially in Facebook or YouTube. We're just getting used to webinars, so it's not it's one of our first rodeos, so we're going to see how this one works. But for now, I want to crack on and start presenting and explaining to you when it makes sense to have an Autonomo, when it makes sense to be registered as an SL, and when it might make sense for you to set up an OU. Okay? Just before we launch, I see that Krishna is asking about connection. If anybody can confirm if their connection is good, just to confirm whether it's at Krishna's side or if it's at our side. Okay, thank you very much. And now I'm going to try and present in a couple of minutes. So if it will be possible, we will start sharing slides. So perfect. There we go. It's working. Miracle. Okay, guys, pleasure to meet you all. And first off, what are we going to talk about? Well, the idea of this webinar is to do with what is the most suitable structure for your venture, your business, and your particularity. Within this, we're going to touch Autonomo, SL, and OU. And the idea being, we're going to touch through what structure you can use for your venture. After that, we're going to touch on a theme, which is what is substance? Now, this is a very important economic and tax rule, which might seem very boring and dull, but it's very relevant for you deciding what you can use. Third, we're going to touch on what if you're a non-EU national? What does it mean for migration? What does it mean for setting up while you're waiting for your approval of visa? And then finally, we're going to touch on some of the benefits of tax breaks under the startup law. Now, this presentation is brought to you by Entrate Tramites and also GrowHub. GrowHub is a specialist provider of Estonian company setups and establishments, and we collaborate on the side for the Estonian side. So although I feel confident explaining how the Estonian system works, I don't necessarily have all the expertise on how to set it up, and we don't in-house in Entrate Tramites. So our trusted partners at GrowHub are there and available to help. But for now, we're going to crack on in and touch a few questions on structuring. So, what structures can you use for your venture? SL or Autonomo? Now, I'm going to start by not talking about OUs, but talk about what are within the Spanish layout and the Spanish setup. First off, we have the Autonomo. Now, in the first year, you've got the social security to pay of around 80 euros a month, accounting costs around 40 euros a month. Critically, you have a thing called unlimited liability, and you cannot necessarily tax optimize as a service company. Now, on the other hand, what we see is the SL. Now, this is a much more bulky, slightly more expensive endeavor. First off, you need a capital deposit of around 3,000 euros. Now, technically under the reform, you can set up a company under €1, but we tend not to recommend it. as it leads to higher and more expensive notary fees. Second, admin costs of setup can be around 500 euros. And then you can get tied in with accounting costs from 100 euros and upwards a month. Okay. So clearly an SL is a more expensive option than the Autonomo. However, critically, an SL gives you limited liability. Now, limited liability. Yes, Giorgio, we will share details afterwards and the presentation will be published. Absolutely. All you need to do if you want to have a copy of the presentation is please email in afterwards. So that was just one of the comments in the comment section. They were asking whether we would be able to share the presentation. Continuing on this theme, with the SL, you've got what's called limited liability. Now, limited liability means that if your business goes wrong, if everything doesn't work out with your business venture, you get sued by a customer, you have your office, which you were renting out, has a rental lease for 10 years, which you can't cancel, you can't pull out of, it protects you in this circumstance. You are only limited to what is within the business. And this is one of the most critical reasons why people actually have limited companies. Quite often we think of limited companies as a reason to save just on tax. But actually, one of the biggest reasons is because they are limited liability. They mean that you don't lose your house, you don't lose your home, you don't lose a lot of your personal assets if things go wrong. 5, an SL allows you to have multiple shareholders. So if you're looking for anything beyond a freelance edition for yourself and you're looking to launch a limited company, you need to have a Sociedad Limitada or a similar limited company to be able to get access and have other participants. There is the possibility in Spain to do comunidades de bienes and other forms of kind of collective associations, but these tend to be inferior to the SL option in almost all situations. For that reason, we are just touching on Autonomo or SL. Critically, any manager, so anybody who's a director or anything else with 25% or more of a shareholding must pay social security. Below that, then you are treated standardly as an employee. Critically, you can also raise investments. So if you're looking to launch a venture which needs outside capital to grow, a simple Autonomo is not for you. You're going to need to look for a limited company solution. Finally, if it is a service company, you can potentially tax optimize by dividing between dividends and salary. Now, I will touch later in the questions on dividend and salary, how the optimization works, and please fire away with any questions in that regard. On the other hand, what we've got is the Autonomo and OU. This is a little bit of a setup compared to the SL. Now, there are a few critical changes that you see within this. First off, Autonomo plus an OU. Now, for those who don't know, an OU is an Estonian limited company. Okay. So, and if you'll see at the bottom, there's a little thing where you can schedule a free consultation today surrounding what we are discussing. Effectively, with an Autonomo and an OU is an Estonian limited company. Now, you might think, well, why on earth would I start a company in Estonia? Critically, Estonia has one of the lowest bureaucratic burdens on limited companies, allowing you to set them up while living in almost any country. And what this means is that if you're not so much interested in heavy tax saving, you're not interested in creating significant substance, but you want to build limited liability and have a simpler system to raise investment, or if you've got cross-border shareholders and others, an OU can be quite an attractive manner of doing this. Compared to German companies, French companies, Dutch companies, we've got a much lighter standard on setup, and critically, by being within the EU, it's got access to European VAT numbers and is not a tax haven in the eyes of any European authority. There's also something which I will touch on as we get on, which is exactly how the tax structuring of an OU works. But effectively, one of your potential options is have an Autonomo with an OU. Now, an OU has around 400 euros, 500 euros of setup costs. So as we see, it's similar in bandwidth on the SL. The only difference is a big chunk of that is tax revenue, which goes to the Estonian government, which helps them finance themselves. Whereas with the SL, most of that money is going to accountants like us or notaries, basically, mainly notaries. So critically, at least they are using that money for something potentially a bit more useful. Now, accounting costs, of course, are higher with an Autonomo or all setup. Maybe you're looking around €80 a month for the combination, so slightly less than the simple SL, but more than the previous Autonomo. Critically, the big advantages I started to touch on is you have limited liability, so you're not going to lose your house. And you can raise investment, okay? The reason I talk about you can raise investment is because if you are looking at a venture which needs outside capital, it can be incredibly attractive. Now, why do I say cannot tax optimize as a service company? Actually, just a question to the audience at the moment. Has anybody already got an OO set up in the audience? Or is anybody particularly looking at setting one up? So I will see if anybody joins in that. In the meanwhile, I'll start doing a little bit of an explanation on how it works. So in terms of tax optimization, why can you tax optimize? Interesting. Okay, Damien Legasa. So on the OO, when you have an SL, what do you have in an SL? With an SL, you can choose to distribute, if it's just one person and your company, you can choose to distribute up to 25% of your profits rather than salary in the form of dividends, which can lead to a lower rate of taxation. The critical reason you can do that is your limited company is in the same country where you reside. It has what we call substance. When you have economic substance, which is real operations, you have the ability to assign a certain share of your profits to that location. This can allow you to lower the tax rate you might be paying on the profits that you make. In contrast, if you've got an OO and you don't have any employees and you've just got a registered address, it is very hard to deposit any profits and substance in that jurisdiction. Okay, so the reason being is if you imagine the counterpart, if you could just set up and send money to any company in any country in the world without there being any true economic transactions underneath it, people would all just be setting up Cayman and Dubai consulting companies, and nobody who was doing consulting would pay any tax in effect. Now, we know in reality this doesn't happen, and this is to do with lots of different transfer pricing rules, but critically, where the source of your production is generally where you have to apply tax. So the normal way to operate if you're a one-person Autonomo with an OO is you use your OO for some expenses. You use it for invoicing your clients to create some stability for them overseas and a reliable limited company framework so that you are protected if anything goes wrong. And then you re-invoice as an Autonomo to this. But critically, you should not leave your profits, if I've got that right, you should not leave and build up profits within the Estonian OU. Otherwise, you could come into problems surrounding substance, in effect. So I'm now going to touch on a bit of substance, which is a particular issue on this. So in general, what we're talking about, why Autonomo O versus SL. Autonomo O, lighter admin costs, it's footloose. So critically, if you don't know you're going to be living in Spain, the hassle of shutting down a Spanish SL and opening it in comparison to how easy it is to open and then operate from many different countries, your Estonian OU, could mean that the OU is also attractive. So if you're not sure you're staying in Spain, you're here for 2-3 years, but you're not certain where you might end up, an Estonian OU could be a very attractive way to set up your startup or business. And they are easier to shut down than SLs. Critically, if your business is in Spanish territory, for instance, you have got a shop, restaurant, bike, anything operating directly here, you've got loads of local work, this is required for Spanish territorial business. Equally, if you want to do tax optimization and you do not have employees outside of Spain and ideally in Estonia, the SL is the only route for real tax optimization for small one-person businesses. Finally, there is a potential benefit from tax breaks on Spanish investors. So if you're going to take away anything from this is at the end of this whole presentation, it's that the Estonian OU can be a very attractive option for you. It can also be an okay option, but nothing too attractive, whereas an SL in your case might actually be the best thing. So it very much depends on your type of business, how international your business is, where your other co-founders might be, because Estonia is brilliant for a business co-founded across national borders, versus where your clients might be. So I would love to hear some questions coming from the audience. So if you've got anything more detailed about your case, I'll start opening up to questions in a few slides' time. What is substance? Why have I been talking about this? What is economic substance? What on earth am I talking about? So substance. Economic substance, this is a very boring text, but it's very important. It's a doctrine in tax law under which a transaction must have both a substantial purpose aside from a reduction of tax liability and an economic effect aside from the tax effect in order to qualify for any tax benefits. What does this mean? If there isn't a true business, you can't just allocate profits to a location where you have no work. Examples. If you are the director of a company and your work location is Spain, that creates some level of substance within Spain, regardless of where the company is. If you have office space, physical rented facilities, where they are based matters also for creating some level of substance. Employees. Where are your employees? Do you have employees within Spain? Do you have them in other jurisdictions? Do you have suppliers who are closely integrated in Spain or elsewhere? Do you have factories? Where are they? The critical part which is trying to be touched on here is substance is heavily defined where your production facilities are, not so much where your customers are. And this is one of the areas of confusion which occurs. Many people think if your clients are international, you can leave all your money overseas. Whereas in reality, it's to do with where the production is. This is why you see lots of Irish multinationals setting up in Ireland a vast array of people working from there. It's not for the good weather. It's because Ireland is got an attractive corporate tax rate, but you have to have workers based there. So I'm going to continue to the end of substance, and then I will open up to questions. Okay. Before I get on to what if you are a non-EU national, I'd like to invite to see if my colleague Alex can join, Alexandra, and if she's got any questions which have been sent through to us privately, which she could begin to ask.
Okay, yeah, I mean, this is a very informative presentation. I think many concepts are just really, really clear. Okay, I have a question. What are the specific eligibility criteria for businesses to qualify for the 15% startup corporate tax discount in Spain? And how can these startups ensure compliance to avail this benefit?
Thank you very much. Okay, so this is a question which is one of the benefits with SL. So when we were talking before, and I'll take a step back now. So in Estonia, one of the critical parts you have in Estonia is their corporation tax is 0% on the moment of having a profit and 20% at the point when you distribute that profit. The general idea with this in Estonia is it makes it more attractive to reinvest in the growth of your business. Now, critically, when you pay that 20% corporation tax rate, you should also pay a dividends tax in the country where you receive it. So the company will pay a 20% dividend tax, but then you as an individual have to pay your dividend taxes based on your country of residence. So one of the myths you see in Estonia is people say you pay 0% and then you don't pay anything else, or you just pay this 20%. But actually, this 20% is then summed up with the income tax break. Now, on the other side, with an SL, there was an interesting part of the reform with the tax reform law, which is that if your business is deemed to be innovative, you gain access to what's called a 15% rate of impuesto de sociedades. So in order to become kind of classified as innovative, you broadly have to show that you're investing a share of your income into R&D, that you are spending funds effectively on increasing your original business plan is developing something new or novel, And the general idea is when you submit this, you need to submit a plan to ENISA, and ENISA, which is the Spanish Innovation Agency, are the people who approve you. Now, with that can give you an even more attractive rate of corporation tax than that which Estonia offers. But, and this is the classic difference, you need to have a business which is seen to be innovative, and it requires many more bureaucratic hurdles. The big benefit in Estonia is the lower level of bureaucratic hurdles, the ease of doing business there. Whereas in Spain, the tax breaks, if you can get them, can be very much worth it and better than the Estonian solution in many cases. You might decide it's too much hassle. So in general, we tend to say the SL route with the startup law and everything else are attractive if you're willing to bear a bit more higher administrative costs, you're willing to bear more overhead because you're really going to be building something significant, whereas Estonia and OUs are really good to just get started. Because taxes are important for those making lots of money, but admin costs are those important for those who are starting. So this is often the trade-off there. So yeah, and any other couple of questions before then we continue on? And if anybody wants to write anything either in commentary here or in YouTube or in Facebook, because we're being broadcast pretty much everywhere, just please write in, and happy to answer any questions. Meanwhile, Alex, Alexandra, anything else you'd like to engage?
No, well, it was basically what you said at the end. Feel free to comment. I'll be reading the questions and Luis will be answering them. Also, right there, you have the link, and also you will have some slides. That will be coming next. We'll have the QR code, so you can scan it and go to the page where we are offering free consultations regarding this subject and taxes. So you can just comment here or book a consultation.
Thank you. I think we just had another one pop up from Babel.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's saying that, would it be fair to say the difference between SL and O is in that 5% versus admin cost of doing SL?
Okay, that's interesting. Of course, there are a wide range of differences, but yes, one of the critical advantages is this, but it's not just the 5%. There's another thing I will touch on, which is to do with the investment relief. Estonian OUs are also potentially slightly better equipped for international investors because they have a lower bureaucratic burden to invest if you're a foreign investor, and they're very common for instance, venture capital funds in Sweden and others. But if you're thinking of it as just a one-person business, not looking for outside investment, then yes, the 5% corporation tax discount that you can potentially get with the Spanish SL versus the OU in the first 4 or 5 years is the trade-off between that and that tax break. And there are a few other grants available. So after the slides on the non-EU national, I'm actually going to touch a bit of that further. But thank you very much for the question. Okay, so marching back in, what if you are a non-EU national? What on earth am I talking about? Why has immigration got anything to do with it? Well, for anybody who's a non-EU national here, who's listening in and in Spain, they probably already know the pain of waiting for your visa to process. Now, with your visa processing, what on earth could be happening? So with the visa process, you often have to wait for a tarjeta comunitaria partnership visa, potentially 6 to 9 months. Now, how on earth do you do that? You may have moved with your partner who already has their job, is well established, but you have got your own freelance activity, you're working, and technically in Spain, you can't register until you got your paperwork ready. The Estonian OU is fantastic for those who are moving and in almost that limbo while they're waiting to be able to legally work. So one of the big recommendations when we talk about a non-EU national is, with an OU in Estonia, there's no visa requirement and you can work for remote businesses. There's no corporation tax on income, which is not distributed. So while trying to get the money out, you're still going to face that issue of 20% versus potentially 15%. You do have the advantage that until you distribute it, any of those sales, so any of the corporate profits which are built up, you can build up cash in the OO while you're waiting for your paperwork to process. And then once it's processed, you can register either as an Autonomo in Spain or self-employed, or even set up another SL to invoice and bring that income out of the OO. Now, you might wonder, why on earth would I do that? Well, if you think Estonian corporate profit tax would be 20%, plus you'd have IRPF de base de euros, which let's say is 21%. There's a rule of maths where you say 100 euros, you take off 20 euros, that leaves you with 80 euros. Of 80 euros, you take off 21% of that, which is like 16 euros 80, which leaves you with 60, I think it's 62.20. No, 63.20, 63 euros 20. So you roughly are paying a 37% rate of tax. Now, as an Autonomo, up to around 50,000 euros of income, you are paying a lower marginal rate of tax than 37%. So it often makes sense to receive at least the first 50,000 in the form of Autonomo. So what you do is you set up your OO, you can keep operating your business while you're waiting for your visa to process. There are no social security requirements in Estonia while you are just building up cash within it. Only when you start to distribute cash do you come into any complications in Estonia. And at that point, if you are registered as self-employed in Spain, there is no issue whatsoever. You can sell throughout Europe, and they're relatively relaxed on expensing rules. They don't have the same paperwork requirements as Spain, and so you can potentially push through a wider range of expenses. Now, the other option, if you're a non-EU national, is the entrepreneurship visa. Now, the entrepreneurship visa is very quick. You can get that processed within 20 to 30 days. Now, the issue with this is it's 20 to 30 days for processing from once you've arrived. But currently, ENISA have a delay of 3 to 4 months to process the innovative business plan, which is required to approve it. So the entrepreneurship visa, although it's one of the quickest visas and can help you get set up quickly as an EU national, and once it's approved, you're able to work, you might, before landing into Spain, already have had to apply for the business plan to be approved. Now, this is a bit of a contradiction because the entrepreneurship visa was explicitly launched with the idea of being able to launch within 20 days. What we have seen is some people have actually set up an OO in Estonia, launched their business, then used that to get an entrepreneurship visa, and then already operating to their OO and then set up a Spanish subsidiary or anything. So the OU in Estonia can be very useful when you're stuck in one of these migration blocks. Alternatively, to stay and live in Spain, you've got the Cuenta Propia visa. Now, the problem with the Cuenta Propia visa is you need to show self-employment income sufficient to cover expenses. It's got a lower requirement in order to qualify, whereas the entrepreneurship visa has a high standard on startup to get in. The Cuenta Propia visa is lower, but Cuenta Propia, you have to either already be on a visa in Spain and be converting, or be applying from outside of the country. And if you're applying from outside of the country, it can be a 6-9 month wait. So that is the slowest option. Now, regardless of all of the above, one of the big reasons people will turn to an OO is because while they're waiting to be legally able to work, they don't want to be sat on their hands twiddling their thumbs. You want to actually do something in life and not just be waiting. And in the meanwhile, you could lose all your freelance clients if you're not working in this intermediary period. It's not like you can just go and say to your clients you had before, hey, by the way, I'm waiting for my visa to process for Spain, and lose 9 months. Will you be able to download a video? We are going to publish a video of this presentation, which everyone will be able to view. And yes, and you can go through the numbers more slowly. I know I've been running through a few of the pieces of data a bit ridiculously quickly. The other thing I really would encourage is please book in for a consultation in the free links, which we're sending through, to ask about your own personal situations. Okay. Now we've got a couple more questions. I'm just trying to think. Let's wait until I get through the tax breaks, because we've only got 3 slides more, and then we'll get to the presentation, because I think we've got a series of questions building up. And I think it'll be good to run through the tax breaks and the startup law and then flow with the questions. So, as touched with Alex before, with the new tax break law, you can basically get a 15% startup corporate tax discount. There's a 50% tax discount on the investment captured in Spain. Now, what on earth does this mean? When you've got a new company and you set it up in Spain, if you have any investors who are Spanish tax resident, they can claim a 50% discount on that investment. So let's say you've got a small business you're starting up, and let's say you've launched, I don't know, a coffee brand, for instance. Now, with this brand, you know you're going to need around 50,000 of capital to really get it going. You put down 20,000 of your own capital, but you need to raise another 30,000 euros. And you're thinking, where can I get that cash? With this tax break in Spain, to raise 30,000 of cash, you only need to find investors who are willing to spend 15,000 of their own cash. Okay. So from 30,000, 30, 40, 50. Yeah. For every euro an investor invests, they can get 50 cents off their tax bill. What that means is your startup becomes way more attractive for them to invest. So if you've got a friend who says, yeah, I'm willing to put in 5,000, you can say, well, actually, if you put in 10, it's only going to cost you 5,000 because you get a 5,000 tax credit on your Spanish tax return. This is a massive tax investment. And if your type of business relies on outside capital and you have an investor network within Spain, this can be a massive reason to choose an SL versus an OL in this case. They have also simplified it where instead of needing a NIA to invest in Spain, which was the most ridiculous barrier in the world, you will only now need a NIF if your investment is below a certain threshold. This was actually one of the reasons why certain venture capital funds and certain angel investors were refusing to invest in Spanish companies. So this has now been released, which makes it easier for outside capital. On top of that, in the new reform, there have been relaxations on some immigration law, but I think that is less relevant for those here. Although if you do have questions on the digital nomad visa, the golden visa, and entrepreneurship visa, we also can answer any questions on migration. So anybody who's interested in migration questions, please write in to info@entretramites.com. If you can't remember what it is, try and spell our name entretramites, et.com, try entretramites.com. And you can find on our website any of these parts. So you can search on communicate with us on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, online, any of these fountains, we are here to answer. Beckham's law, this is a part which is slightly different, but if you set up an SL, theoretically under the new Beckham's law, you should be able to apply for Beckham's law, which will allow a flat 24% income tax rate, an exemption from the wealth tax or the estate tax for the first 6 years. Interestingly, also, any international non-labor income will be untaxed. As this presentation is more to do with the SL Autonomo, I will kind of run past this quite quickly. However, with the new reforms, if you have an SL, this is a valid option to use as justifying reasons for Beckham's law. Previously, Beckham's law only applied if your company, if you were moving for the purpose of employment. Now, self-employment and limited companies also do apply. If you're already in Spain and have tax residence in Spain, usually not. So if you have to have had 5 years of non-tax residence in Spain to apply. Have if you have arrived this year, and depending on when you gain tax residence, it is possible. And for many students here who may not have fully registered, you might still be eligible to apply for Beckham's law. So if you have not yet worked in Spain, if you don't yet have a social security number, or you've only just started with a social security number because of an SL or your first job within Spain, you may be eligible for Beckham's law. So if either of those occurrences have happened within 6 months, even though you are not within 6 months of arriving into Spain, you could very well be eligible. Okay. Questions. Alex, if you could take some of the questions from the top, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, okay, we have some questions here. Okay, let's see. Okay, from Giorgio, it's quite easy to shut down O. Is a good advice to starting a business with an O and then turning it into an SL? How is the process to make this change?
Okay, this is quite an interesting one because people, it's like, okay, I started a company and a limited company. How do I move that business to another company? Now, there are a few different ways in which you can transfer intellectual property and operating businesses between two limited entities. The most common, and one of the advantages of this is As Estonia tends to have a more relaxed accounting standard, it can sometimes be easier to move intellectual property out of an Estonian company to a SL compared to other jurisdictions. What you can often do, let's say you set up an e-commerce on a website and you're selling through your OU, but then you finally settle in Spain, your core market is Spain, and you're hiring employees, and really you are the sole director, you are based in Spain, and you say, look, I need to set up an SL. Or you know that you can get investment for further growth within Spain. What you simply do is you make a transfer invoice to purchase the e-commerce business from the Estonian entity. This, on the Estonian entity side, is equivalent to purchasing a small business. It's equivalent to purchasing any other business service. It counts as income on the side of the Estonian entity and an expense or an investment on the Spanish side. Depending how you structure it, you can either just use it as a service contract, and it can be a minimal amount. Usually, if it's an early stage business and there are no other investors, there's very few restrictions on transfer pricing. So unless the business is highly profitable, you can often just move it in and out of different businesses. So you would move your operating business into the new SL and then shut down the OU. Now, with the shutdown process of the OU, you need to notify your local agent, which you have, and then basically proceed in the shutdown process. Now, that's an area where it's probably best to get in touch with Manuel from GrowHub. In terms of that, any questions on that, you can write in Untitled Chapter, and at any point we can refer and pass you on to specialists on that who are much better on exactly the minutiae. But broadly, you would transfer the actual operating business into the SL and then continue going. Now, the only risk is if you build a really big business, this could be challenged by the Estonian tax authorities if they say, well, really, you've built up this massive business, so you've transferred it basically for free. However, at any of the earlier stage businesses without outside investment, this is not usually a problem for the transfer out. Did that make sense, what I just said, Alexandra, or have I just run myself around in circles? What part was not clear?
It makes sense.
Okay.
I think it's clear. Okay, we have another one here, which is from Damian. Is Estonia easier with expenses comparing with SL Autonomo in Spain? Like, for example, in Spain, gas traveling freelancers may be complicated. How is it in Estonia? Do they check the details of expenses?
So in Estonia, it's basically you self-file based on transaction receipts. So if you've got, so one of the actual very nice things in Estonia, if you've got an Estonian OU and an Estonian digital ID, when you register a company, okay, let's take a step back. There are many countries where it's easy to set up a business. In the UK, you can set up a business online in 24 hours and it'll cost you £12. But the problem occurs after you've set up the business and you've got it operating. The UK is still one of the lightest touched areas. But one of the issues you face is setting up bank accounts, having transfer details and everything afterwards. The big benefit you get in Estonia is with the digital identity, you can basically set up your company and be ready to go live and also able to access all the banking system and all the banks you could imagine as if you were physically there in Estonia. This is a very useful part because what you effectively do is you just basically process your transactions through an Estonian bank or through TransferWise or Revolut. You can get many of these different types of bank accounts. And usually the electronic transfer record is sufficient. Now, for larger transactions, and if you want to claim back VAT, you need to have a VAT receipt. But unlike in Spain, on a VAT receipt in Estonia, you just need to have the expense and the person who sold it to you. You don't also need your financial details. One of the ridiculous barriers you see in Spain is they require factura, which has both the VAT details of, for instance, your company and the company you're purchasing from, and vice versa, which clearly creates much more hassle, whereas you can just go get the receipt from the till in Estonia, and that is valid for any expenses you're going to process. There are certain expenses which can be potentially harder and easier to query, which is if the expenses are outside of Estonia, you can't be claiming back VAT on those expenses in general. So, for instance, one of the advantages you have if you're registered in Spain is any of your Spanish resident expenses, you can claim back the VAT or IVA. So, for instance, you buy a laptop, you spend 1,210 euros, 210 euros of that is the VAT, you can claim that cash back from the Spanish government. Whereas if you were buying a laptop in Spain from your Estonian OU and you weren't shipping it to Estonia, it's very possible that you'd have to pay the Spanish VAT and not be able to claim it back. So that's the only area of disadvantage you see on the expensing. But on international expensing, flights, tickets, traveling to conferences related to your work, all of that becomes lighter, basically, in Estonia.
Okay, good. Now I have a question here. Someone's asking, is there any post-approval obligation or reporting requirement for entrepreneurs granted the entrepreneurship visa in Spain?
Could you repeat that, please? Apologies.
Yeah, of course. Okay. Is there any post-approval obligation or reporting requirement for entrepreneurs granted the entrepreneurship visa in Spain?
So if you're granted the entrepreneurship visa in Spain, in general, there is a requirement to set up an SL or Autonomo. It's a bit weird if you set up as an Autonomo, and in general, the consideration is to set up an SL. But the interesting thing with the entrepreneurship visa, it's one of the few visas where you can be there less than 183 days a year and still renew it. So you can actually be non-tax resident and be tax resident in another jurisdiction, but you would need to set up your SL. Equally, if you get the entrepreneurship visa, you can get access to Beckham's law, which becomes very attractive because if you set up an SL and have that, and if you're a high earner, you will only be paying 24% income tax. And critically, any assets you have worldwide are untaxed. Where can that get interesting? Well, let's say you've got flats which you've got rented out in any other countries because you've had a previous successful business venture. Those flats would be non-taxable. They would only face the tax in their local jurisdiction. You would not be paying Spanish taxes. So one of the really interesting and nice parts of the reforms which were pushed through is that Beckham's law has been expanded, which of course, for any of you who are already here established in Spain, I'm sorry, unlucky. You probably are not eligible unless you have not started working yet, you've not got a social security number, or this has only happened in the last 6 months. But the entrepreneurship visa does have a really interesting side benefit with the Beckham's law. For higher earners, obviously, if your income is below 50,000 euros, it doesn't make that much sense. Or if you don't have, or if below 50,000 with higher assets outside. What else we got?
Okay. Well, we have another question here in StreamYard from Babu, but I think you already clarified this before. But if you are already in Spain and you have your tax residence in Spain, can you apply for the Beckham law?
Yeah, that one's basically covered. If you got your social security number in the last 6 months, started working in the last 6 months, or if it was a limited company or anything from January this year, because they still haven't published the application form, you could be eligible. So if you've got your social security number January onwards this year, if you started working January onwards this year, please get in touch because it might be possible.
Okay. And we have another one from Giorgio. Is it mandatory to inform Hacienda or the Seguridad Social that you have created an O if you are already an Autonomo in Spain? He also says, I imagine the case you receive investor funds in the O.
Okay, so there's an interesting one on this. When you set up the O initially, no. However, if the OU ends up having assets above 50,000 euros, or you end up having profits averaging more than 10,000 euros over 3 years, you will need to declare this to Hacienda. The reason being is there's a thing called the Modelo 720. The Modelo 720 is a declaration of your overseas assets worth more than 50,000. So to avoid people basically hiding everything offshore, the Hacienda obliges anybody who's got assets of more than 50,000 euros to declare them. Now, if you've got an OU which isn't profitable because you are investing and growing and everything else, it's possible that you basically have no valuation put to it. And if you've got no profit, it doesn't matter because effectively it's loss making. You could theoretically have it at its asset value. Equally, most early stage investment is in the form of loans through convertible loan notes and other aspects. If you have convertible loan notes, safe certificates, or any of those other investment instruments, in effect, not the Hacienda Social Security tax, God, my brain is freezing in English and Spanish and everything. Yes, so if you have an outside investor and they invest in the form of loan agreements or anything like that, that doesn't actually create a valuation of your business. However, if your business is profitable, if it receives a significant equity round, then yes, you are going to need to declare it, not instantly, but following the first full accounts completed tax year where your business was valued at more than 50,000 euros. So yes, you do need to declare, but not instantly. And depending on the type of business, you can potentially push it off. So for lots of high growth businesses, you can very much potentially get quite far without needing to declare. Also, declaring doesn't mean you need to pay any taxes on it. It's just notifying the government. One of the important things is many people think, well, what if I just don't tell them that's the best idea? That's a terrible idea. Tell the Spanish government that you've got this asset, because if they ever find it and you haven't told them, they are going to assume you are playing a game. Whereas if you've told them, they are not going to, it's a lot easier to basically explain everything right. Like the most important thing with the Hacienda is being able to have a reasonable story which you can communicate to them. Okay, we've got another one which just came in from Babu.
Okay, well, he says that if he forms an OU in Estonia, would he need an Estonian address to be registered? Like living in Spain, what would this be if it's required?
Yes, you would. However, and you need what's called a local agent, but that's pretty much somebody who receives your mail. That's something which we can put you in touch with Manuel for, and I'm sure he'd be happy to help. Yes. Sorry, that was kind of quick. I suppose the good point to say at this point is thank you everybody who has come and logged in. If you have any other questions, if you have any other doubts, please book in for a consultation. We're here. There's no preconditions, anything else. Just book in, say hi. If you have any friends who need help on immigration, tax, accounting, we are here and happy to help. Alexandra, anything I'm missing on this, or what else should I have said which I forgot to say?
No, I mean, all the necessary links and also the QR code to book your consultations are there in the comments. You can just scroll up and book your consultation. And well, to solve all your doubts. Yeah, you have it there in the comments and also here in the screen in the QR code. Feel free to book it right away.
Okay. Well, guys, it's been an absolute pleasure, and have a fantastic.
I think that would be it because we don't have any more comments.
Yeah, perfect. Un gusto y tener un muy buen día a todos. And hopefully